मैले उहाँलाई फेरि स्वागत गरेँ। आज उहाँले रफली 40 मिनट जति सुरुमा आफ्नो कुरा राख्नुहुन्छ, त्यसपछि चाहिँ हामी उहाँलाई प्रश्न उत्तर गर्छौँ।
Thank you. Good afternoon, namaskar सबैजनालाई. Thank you for being here. सबैले जो अफलाइन अनलाइन जोडिनु भएको छ. अलिकति ब्याकग्राउन्डमा त कुरा आइ नै हाल्यो अनि हामीले टाइटल हेर्दा पनि मोबाइल एप्स अलिअलि फ्यान्सी जस्तो सुनिएको छ, but I'll try to make it simple. It's part of my doctoral research and therefore it's very close to my heart. Doctoral research यो अर्थमा आएको छैन किन जर्नलमा आर्टिकल पब्लिस भइसकेको छैन. So what I expect आजको शेयरिङ पछि हजुरको input in form of question, any kind of feedback, so then I can fine tune this article. So this is basically an article that I've written and I've sent it to a journal. So I begin. अब मोबाइल एप्स चाहिँ किन भन्नेबाट पनि सुरु गरौँ. अब यहाँ टेक्निकल ब्याकग्राउन्डको साथीहरू पनि हुनुहुन्छ होइन. And it's not just for someone who comes from a technical background. Everybody uses mobile apps, and mobile apps has become an integral part of our life because it changed the way we used to we communicate and we participate in different spheres of life. And I just want to put some data, just the global statistics. What it suggests is, as a user, we spend around 1/3 of our waking time. That's 4.8 hours using apps. We, as in, I'm giving a global statistics again. Same way, again, as a user, mobile app user, we are using around 8 to 9 apps per day and 30 apps a month. If you look in terms of the mobile app ecosystem, the ecosystem here I mean is the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store cumulatively. That's the ecosystem, and the multitude of the apps that we use. There are more than actually 5.7 million apps. That's a 2023 statistics, and that keeps growing. Every day we log into a new website and we'll give you new statistics. This is the data that I quoted in my article, so I remember that. And then if you look in terms of the number of downloads that happens, mobile apps in totality in the ecosystem, it's 255 billion downloads, year 2023 statistics, which shows mobile apps in terms of the economy of the app, it's huge, it's humongous, it's ever growing. And that's what I think that took my interest as a researcher, and that's something we all can relate to. But having said that, the app economy is increasing, it's growing. Nevertheless, there are statistics again which suggest that the attrition rate stands at 71%, which means again 2/3 of the global app users who have adopted their app, who have started using an app, tend to uninstall or tend to discontinue it within 3 months of their installation. Now that's the scary part, or that's a challenging part for the app marketers, app developers, app strategists, marketers in general. So when I started toying with my idea of my research topic, it was largely not in mobile apps initially, in the very beginning. It was on information system in general, but that was too huge to cover. And then I kind of narrowed it down to mobile apps. To make it more specific. My research context was in Thailand, so it's an exploratory research. I will tell why did I undertake exploratory research in a while, because my proposal was on a mixed method study. Interestingly, I kind of deviated from my initial proposal idea and then moved on to just doing qualitative for the time being, and all my advisory committee, they agreed. Had they not agreed, I would have to do the entire thing. But there was a rationale why I chose to move from mixed method study, where I initially wanted to develop a scale on discontinuance intention, and then I kind of moved away from that topic. So with that, thanking everyone, I don't know if I forgot to thank Pratyushji, sorry, for having me here. This is the second time I'm here. So to begin, yeah, so there have been a lot of research in the area of information system, more so on the area of post-adoption information system. What do we do after we adopt an information system? Here, information system I mean as mobile apps. But again, even in the area of post-adoption of information system, there have been a lot of research around why do people adopt and why do they discontinue. There were not many research around what do they do in between. Like I adopt an app, but before I discontinue, what do I do? So there is still, I would say, still a research gap on this area, and that's where I wanted to start exploring because the antecedents or the reasons for mobile app discontinuance has been there, a lot of literature around that area. So I said, okay, moving beyond that, I would like to understand what are the adjustment practices. So the word adaptive means the adjustment practices that we as mobile app users do. The coping mechanism, the coping practices or the strategies that we go around when we are, let's say, dissatisfied using a particular app. So that's the study area. So beginning with this data has come earlier, the attrition rate, and that's why what I'm trying to say is my research output probably will be useful to the practitioners and also academicians in the area of information system, because everybody wants to curtail the disengagement that users have with the app. Like they want to ensure how do we keep the users engaged with the particular app, whatever they're offering, the marketers. On top of that, the mobile app ecosystem, apart from the data that I shared earlier on, the app economy also includes free app and paid apps. Also the app model that we know about as freemium models, where you continue using an app for free, and then after a point they start charging you. So if you look into in the Google Play App Store, this is the recent data again, 2024 early, 96% of the apps are free. Whereas in the Apple App Store, 95% of the apps are free. Okay, so we can understand a scenario where the number of, earlier on it used to be around 97, 98. So the number of, the percentage of free apps are coming down and paid apps are slowly increasing, and we can talk about that. We can share our experience also, why that. Obviously I'll enter into my research domain. So interestingly, discontinuance is something that people view as something as very static or a permanent behavior. I'd say once people discontinue, that's over. No, but that's not the case, interestingly. Discontinuance is something that can be temporary and permanent. So that's where the time and the space dimension also comes around. And that's where I would like to quickly jump to a picture. So a lot of different types of discontinuance, and those Solomon and Rinta Kahila, these are the researchers who for the first time they have coined the forms of discontinuance, highest discontinuance, not just mobile apps, any kind of information system. Usually this is dependent on the life cycle of an information system. As we all can see, the life stages that they suggest is it starts with exposure. We get exposed to a particular information system, move on to an adoption, then to a continued use stage, and then discontinuation happens. But not before reaching to a state of discontinuance. Exposure, if somebody just don't like an app, like for example, you find an app interface very clumsy, you don't like it, maybe you just feel like rejecting it then and there. Or you could move to a stage of initial adoption and then decide to discontinue, regressive. And then to a stage of continued use, you compare different alternatives, and then reach a state that you might want to discontinue for the time being. Like say on social media, a lot of us, like we get disenchanted. I mean, I myself, I'm a heavy Twitter user, but there are occasions where I feel like I don't want to use it for the time being. And there can be a lot of cases with social media users where they want to take a temporary break and then come back. And that's a temporary discontinuance. Quitting after a stage where you decide I don't want to be there any longer, and replacement when you switch to a competitor app or an information system. So that's how they've coined the forms of discontinuance. This literature came about very recently in 2022. There's a paper published. So it's not been very old literature. So coming back, why I wanted to emphasize on is this because I actually play around the area of temporary discontinuance in my research as well, and that's what my research participants had to say when they said narrated their experience. So some of the keywords that might repeat in my research, so I thought I'll explain it at the outset itself. Disconfirmation. The reason why we talk about adjustment practices is because as a user I come across this sense of negative disconfirmation. As it says, it's a theory-driven thing, which is taken from expectation disconfirmation theory by Oliver, 1977. It's a mismatch between what you expect and what you experience. Now, if you have a positive experience, it's a positive disconfirmation. If it is negative, it's a negative disconfirmation, and then you end in the middle. It's a continuum, basically. And there's another word very popular. Now, I come from marketing domain, so therefore these words are very common. So I thought I'll share with you. Cognitive dissonance. For all of us, we use an app, we don't like it. So basically it's like the negative disconfirmation that results. The cognitive dissonance is the discomfort, the discomfort that results from the negative disconfirmation means I expected something and something else happened. The app is not as useful as I felt it would be in the first place. So cognitive dissonance happens, which is basically in simple word the discomfort of using any information system. And then coming to appropriating practices is because I'm trying to make some adjustment, because globally research has shown that as a user, for instance, you adopt an app and you don't like it, does not mean that you're going to uninstall it then and there. Just आजको दिनमा मैले इनड्राइभ चलाइरहेको थिएँ, पठाउ पनि छ. One particular occasion, I was trying to get writers, कोही पनि आएन, and then I just thought, okay, let me just get rid of this. We don't do that. Generally, we don't do that. That's what my research findings suggest. Probably you might have your own experience we can share. So a lot of the users, what we do is we tend to toy with at least, give chance to 2 to 3 alternative apps. Usually that's the case. Choice we don't tend to have multiple options like 7, 10. No, that's what consumer behavior theory also suggests. So we generally have 2 to 3 major apps which we tend to have, and then always use it for a simultaneous use or alternate use. So appropriating practices, it's a technical term, but that it actually means it involves when you try to recombine and repurpose the use of IT to try out different things to resolve things. So as a user, what am I trying to do with the app when I have some kind of negative disconfirmation the moment I get exposed to an app? What do I do? What are all the strategies that I apply? What are the practices that I involve till the time I reach the stage of discontinuance? So that's about appropriating practices, and that's my research question. What do they do from the point of mobile app adoption to discontinuance? So that drives my research. Because though it's these terms, adaptation, accommodating practices, appropriating practices are used very synonymously, there's very slight difference among these terms. Again, it's not very distinct, I would say, but why I chose appropriating practices, I would like to emphasize that. Adaptation, accommodating and appropriating means making some kind of adjustment with you as a user and then with the technology. The technology that we're using here in my context is the mobile apps. So though it all involves adjustment, earlier on the adaptation and accommodating were more about adjustment with the technology. It is more about fitting them to your requirement. So it's a little more broader. Appropriation is a little more broader because it also includes adaptation and accommodation as well. So there are different definitions, but rather than going to definition, we'll try to, of course, given the limitation of time. So I'll tell you how did I go about doing this research as a doctoral student as well in my research journey. So when I was there in AIT, the first thing that I did was like the idea, as I said earlier, the idea was to develop a scale. Even for scale development, I would have to do the qualitative and then the quantum. So I had to start with the interviewing. But the initial idea of interviewing was to develop a scale for discontinued intention. The intention is something futuristic. So when I started asking people cannot exactly tell you the intention that they will have in future. So what they were giving me answers were more about the instances that resulted in discontinuance. So they'll say, oh, one fine day I took त्यहाँको कन्टेक्स्ट यहाँको नेपाली कन्टेक्स्ट आएन because I didn't interview a single Nepali respondent, honestly, because I didn't want to take that extra labor of translation. That was the only reason not having Nepali respondent. But I had altogether, of course, 38 participants from 21 different nationalities, including American, African, European, and Asian. And Asians, of course, the majority being Thai nationals, 8 of them. Rest of them from, of course, the Southeast Asia and Asian region. And the age group was from 21 to 57, males 20, female 18, work experience from 0 to 28 years. Before moving on the word count, what I'm trying to say is the sampling that I utilize is a purposive heterogeneous sampling, because mobile app, as I initially mentioned, it's an ubiquitous thing. Everybody uses mobile app. So rather than focusing on a particular age group, I wanted to have a generic model to see, okay, whatever I'm suggesting, probably trying to get into, does it apply across all age groups, gender, and across all strata? So therefore, a purposive heterogeneous sampling was adopted. Of course, it follows an interpretivist paradigm, because qualitative research is based on that. I'm sure for those coming from social science background, we are well versed with this idea. Because we believe the basic premise of interpretivism is where we say that any kind of reality, including human behavior, is socially constructed by individuals. And therefore, we believed as researchers, whether this is my doctoral research and I'm the only one doing the interviews, but I keep saying we because my advisor is also part of this whole editing and everything. Our support has been there. So we believe that when we wanted to explore about these adjustment practices, appropriating practices, we want to get it from the narrated experiences of the users who have faced some kind of negative disconfirmation with their mobile apps uses. So anyone who has used apps in their life for any kind of purpose, so when I initially have to say this also. So app usage is basically of two types. One is called hedonic, the other is called utilitarian. Hedonic is apps that we use for enjoyment purpose. Utilitarian is one you use it for functional reasons. But these days the demarcation is not very distinct, because even if it is a utilitarian app, it does have a hedonic angle or vice versa. So we cannot say this app is purely utilitarian or hedonic. So sometimes there can be some kind of confusion and disagreement. So I have not classified apps as per se. For example, let's say YouTube is largely it's a hedonic app, we would think, entertainment. But what if it is a teacher who uses YouTube videos to teach in the class? Now that becomes a utilitarian purpose for a hedonic app. So therefore I don't define it closely bind my definition. So what we said was we kept it open. Anyone who remembers using any kind of apps in their life, it's like not restricted to any point of time, but we believe that the people will remember apps that they've used in a recent time, and they would talk about it. So any kind of app. So I'll talk about the category of apps also. So while we asked, like, do you have any experience of using an app which you didn't really like and you might have wanted to use other alternatives? How were your experience? What did you do? What did you do much before you wanted to let go of that app? So that's how the interviews, semi-structured interviews was structured around. Of course, interviews, the total 38 interviews, transcribed more than 100,000 words. Duration, most of them were, of course, around 40 minutes on average, 40 to 45 minutes. For the analysis, I used abductive coding. Generally for qualitative research, more so in the grounded theory area, people use inductive coding. But abductive coding, at least in the management area, it's getting prominence. Abductive is, of course, not inductive, not deductive, in between. So it kind of builds on the fact that, okay, you have some initial priority codes, some predetermined codes, and then we as researchers are also open to some kind of unforeseen ideas. So it kind of takes the best of both. So abductive coding is what we utilized. And just quoting one, just to tell how did I do the coding. So grab and bolt is like Pathawa and InDrive. For those who have been to Thailand, you might also know these brands. And it's also very popular in the Southeast Asian region. So these are the two ride-hailing apps. So just somebody said. So what I said was the respondent quote is there, and this is WP is like the code for working professionals. So my participants included, of course, students at AIT and also employees at AIT and also elsewhere. So interestingly, because of course it was not COVID time of that particular app, but rather you were trying to do some kind of work around that area to make sure that you are still engaged with the app. So these are the coding thing. So around workaround, we coded it as simultaneous use into version of an app, then going on to using a paid version, and then sometimes alternating between free and a paid version. There are occasions where you have to use a free version, paid version. For example, I have a 2-month-old kid. The kid has to be put into sleep, and then the YouTube ads, which is much more in Thailand. 2 months, that's like irritating. So therefore, they have to go to subscribe to a paid version of YouTube. But let's say that was because I was with my kids, they had to be put to sleep. But maybe there are other occasions where I don't think that I don't need it any longer. I'm just an example. Or there could be for other apps also. So alternating between where you want to or necessarily want to have a paid app and where you can switch from paid to free or free to paid. So those were the alternative use cases. So which means you are still wanting, and I give the categorized as engagement practices is because I'm not trying to let go of the app, I'm trying to engage around the app as a user. So that's the engagement. The other kind of engagement practices that we noticed was on reframing, where you're trying to repurpose the use of IT. And that's what the definition of appropriating practice. Repurpose as in, okay, I care about my health and I'm a avid health, I want to keep track of my fitness. So I'm using a fitness app, but sometimes this fitness app also wants you to input a lot of stuff there, the calories or whatever. So I feel that that's a little annoying as an app. So I want to move from that to a wearable device. So now having it in my hand is going to be making my life more easier. So there are occasions where not letting go of the app completely, but repurposing it so that you still will be connected to the app, but try to repurpose its use. So repurposing, integrating use or restraining use at times. I mean, I know I have to use the app, but I'm trying to consciously restrain the user as well. Because I know if I use this particular app, there's an app called Lazada in Thailand, which is very, it's it's like an Amazon in Thailand. So when you have that, it has a lot of fancy offers. Everybody wants to download and just keep ordering something. So if I know that the moment I have an app, I'm going to keep ordering something that I might not use, like using it. So I'll try to restrain by maybe not having the app for the moment, right? Or just switching off the notification. That's so many ways. So you're trying to say that you want to restrain the user yourself. So still wanting to engage, but on a lesser level. So so that's on our engagement practices. So likewise, then we moved on to discontinue. There are occasions where people also discontinue apps, maybe not on a temporary basis, but on a not on a permanent basis, but on a temporary basis. Like I quoted about social media usage. A lot of them have to talk about. I know if I get into Facebook, I just don't leave. So Instagram or Snapchat, also there were examples earlier on. So I just consciously want to take a break. So temporary discontinuance. Those were the cases, which is now not an engagement level. It's already suggesting you're trying to disengage. So that those would relate to disengagement. And then the final one in our research, which came prominently, where people had apps. Interestingly, this is a story that I would like to share. A lot of them, there are people who had more than 40 apps, 60 apps, 100 apps, and they have lost count of how many apps they have. They're like just scrolling on and on and on. And like my interviewers are there, and they're still, oh, I didn't know this app was there. And I tell them, what is this app? They're like, I don't know, why is it there? This is the state that we've reached, we don't know. And there were also apps that I said, why did you download it? I don't know why did I download it, because I really don't know what the particular use of this app, but let it be there. I mean, in any way, it's not costing me, The reason why people have apps is because they anticipate a future use. Right now, they're deferring the use because they don't know what the exact use is, but maybe I might use it in the future, and for that reason, they continue to have. And that's the reason, because it's not costing you any money. if the apps will start costing you, then probably people would think about the cost and the space as well. There are also conscious customers like who care about there's a term about consumer mindfulness these days, because if I'm as a consumer, I'm mindful about my app uses and also the space that it occupies. Okay, it does not cost me, but I'm like, why is it taking so much of my space? Okay, let me see the apps that are taking so much of my space, let me deactivate it. And therefore there are these apps with notification that okay, your apps has been dormant for so many period of time. Mostly with travel apps. I don't know if you've noticed, like travel app, we tend to use it on a certain time. So it shows, okay, trip.com, it has been dormant for 6 months because you've never traveled. Right? So therefore there's a notification which tells whether you would want to keep continuing the app or you want to delete it for the moment. Or a social media that you've not used, whether you want to keep using it or you want to deactivate it. So that's up to my discretion as a user, but for those anticipating users, it's like I defer the use for the moment because I really don't know if I want to use TikTok because I never used it, but somebody told me just have it. So okay. So those were the kind of responses. So may not be very clear, but what I'm trying to suggest is just like how we categorized and came about doing the coding. So this is an example of coding. I can share these PPTs later. The findings, coming towards the finding, and I'm trying to close it next 10 minutes. Okay. So as the initial, the stages of the information life cycle also talks about the initial use, continued use and the discontinued. They talk about exposure, adoption, continued, discontinued. So these stages have come from that particular model. What we wanted to say is our negative disconfirmation with any app as an app user that happens at the point from when you are initially exposed to an app and to the state that you want to go to the continued use stage. So that's where negative disconfirmation happens, and that's where all of these practices happens, whether it's engagement practices or disengagement. We categorize these into 4 forms. So this is our output of our research. So why we wanted to categorize? Because we have seen that engagement practices are something that are more on problem-focused scoping strategies. We take help of coping theory. This research is largely based on 2 theories. One is the expectation disconfirmation theory, EDT, which talks about the negative disconfirmation, and we club that with the coping theory. So coping is like not always when there's a stress or something, no. Even when you're trying to come up with a better solution, like here, okay, workaround is also a kind of problem-focused coping strategy. That's what the literature suggests. Workaround and reframing, and therefore we call it as engagement practices. Because for both these, the upper side, these are engagement because until here you are not trying to get rid of the app. And the lower 2 are the disengagement practices because then the lower 2 are somewhere you are trying to move towards discontinuance. Even for that matter deferral, because you are not too sure, you have not even used it. But when you are not too sure, it means you are not too sure of using it. You are rather not sure when you want to use it, or you are not even sure where the app is there in your mobile. Therefore, we said it's more on a disengagement side of it. So that's the output, the generic model that we suggested. The other finding from our research is the kind of apps category. Of course, as I said, the multitude of apps in the ecosystem. There's so many different types. When I interviewed, I got to know there are apps like this, including meditation apps, which is getting very popular. But again, the major ones, the top 3, social media, communication and entertainment, and the names of the apps that the participants mentioned, and the number of times that it occurred in the interview. So I kind of scripted that. And interestingly, these findings also align with the latest research, because around the globe right now, even social media apps are the most dominant, and communication apps. Social media and communication, other than art. So other were like entertainment, dating apps, online shopping, ride-hailing, travel, fitness, gaming, e-learning apps, music apps, food delivery, mobile payment, graphic design, language. Yeah, so I think the one that we know in Nepal is InDrive, but others are all from in a different context. So a few examples. Moving on to the theoretical implication. Now, since I said there were only three, of course, published papers on appropriating practices done in the context of information system, but they have never done it for mobile apps. The earlier research had done it for iPad users. Appropriating practices may be previous research mobile apps ma bhako chaina. So that way it's a novel novel thing for my research, I would say. The other thing is even on mobile apps, the previous research in academic research, most research have focused on one particular app. They take one example of a ride-hailing app and then do research on that. R is different because we consider the entire ecosystem of apps. That's different in my study. Third, in my study, we use the lens of expectation disconfirmation theory and the theory of coping to see how people mitigate this negative disconfirmation with the app and how do they go about applying these appropriating practices. Nobody categorizes it as engagement and disengagement. So this is entirely novel. So engagement, as we said, we align engagement practices with more on problem-focused coping strategies, because when it comes to problem-focused coping strategy, you are trying to ensure that these practices, whether it's workaround or reframing, you are still being engaged with that. Whereas the other two, with disengagement coping practice, that's more on emotion-focused lines, and it takes root for disengagement, such as discontinuance and deferring. Like in discontinuance, a lot of people like, okay, earlier on I using Snapchat, a lot of those. But since none of my circle is using it, so therefore I'm no more in it. So that's more on the disengagement line. So the factors could be different. Like I've written, now this is one aspect of my research, but the other aspect of my research also talks about the factors that cause people to discontinue apps. So those two, I wrote it in form of op-ed pieces for Kathmandu Post. So those were like clearly, I clubbed it into 5 different groups. Like people discontinue apps because it's something related to the app itself. You don't like the app user interface or something. It's complex. It requires you to sign in assets. I'm just giving an example. So app itself could be one. The device could be one. The device as a mobile device. And the infrastructure around internet also could be one. It could be about the community that is required. Like for a dating app, there's no problem with the device or something, but the people who are there continue to post something random which is so obnoxious that you don't want to continue using that particular dating app. So it's the community of the users also. There are some community-based apps and there are non-community-based apps. So third is the users based. Fourth is the external environment or the regulatory mechanisms. Like in China, for people who were studying in Thailand, they were using Facebook, but then the moment you go to China, I had to delete it, uninstall it, because it's a regulatory thing there. So regulatory mechanism and external environment. External also has to do with the other competing apps also. Like the moment earlier on, even Uber was there in Thailand, but once Grab got in, Uber is nowhere. So it's more like an external threat, competitors that kind of cause you, because now Uber is no longer, I cannot use Uber in Thailand, as simple. So those were the 5 major factors around why people discontinue apps. But that's different aspect. That will require a different article altogether, but this one is more on, then I thought, okay, this is something very common. People write about it, people have been doing about it, and there have been, the antecedents have already been discussed about discontinuance, so I want to do something beyond that, on the adjustment side of it. And the last one, anticipating use, is something very new in our research, because nobody has considered it as a deferral mechanism, and also kind of in disengagement practices, because this is disengagement because at the moment I'm not too sure, I'm uncertain about the app use, and therefore we classify it as disengagement. The practical implication, of course, its use, just to put it very quickly, like the moment marketers would get to know, okay, there are apps, I'm trying to make sure my users never leave me, I want to always have new users using my app. A lot of times marketers tend to focus on that side also, while also not caring about how many of the existing users stay with us, right? So if marketers, of course in the area of big data and analytics, if they can figure out as among my app users, those who are new to my app or those who have been continued users, what are the reasons? What are they doing? What kind of adjustment practices are they doing? Are they continuing to stay with me for time, from the time they've installed the app, or are they doing something in between? Are they reinstalling the app? Have they logged out of it at one point of time? So if you can measure and analyze these kind of pattern, for the marketer it's a big data to then come up with appropriate strategies. What should I do to prevent people from discontinuance? So around strategies, because people are doing simultaneous use in workaround. So if in simultaneous use, if I know that if I can provide some better offer than my competitor, the marketer will definitely make sure that my app user will not go to my competitor, right? So if these kind of nuances that they get from understanding or perspective about users trying to adjust with a particular app. I mean, every app for that matter is not going to be without any kind of fault, right? There could be some issues with some kind of app. So if they can understand how the users go around doing this adjustment, I think they can come up with better and more targeted offers and strategies. That's what I would say. And limitation, because for things, first because it is purely a qualitative study. For those who come from quant background, they find qualitative to be like a storytelling thing. In Nepal, I see that a lot, interestingly, unlike in other part of the globe, where qualitative is getting a lot of prominence. I see that. Qualitative also could have been done through multiple methods, but here I have just started with semi-structured interviews. Later on, it could be done more on a longitudinal study concept. This was more cross-sectional, because if you do it longitudinal across a period of time, then it might give you better insights. The thought is, of course, chain side we felt was because the app usage is, of course, it's an ubiquitous activity, it's a universal activity, everybody is doing it. So let's have people from across all age group and different ethnicity, from geographical context. But having said that, we did that, though it largely in an Asian context. But maybe later research can focus on a particular age group, because the way millennials will use app is different from how Gen Z and Gen Y use it. As simple. There have been research that say there are some differences as well. So maybe future research can focus on those directions. And also, like for example, this is exploratory research. We just came out with those 4 types of appropriating practices. Maybe in the future, more empirical research, more on quantitative lines can be done to see, okay, if there is a workaround practices, what is the eventual outcome? Does it lead to more of disengagement or engagement? Does it lead to brand loyalty? I mean, in the area of marketing, that's what we care. Will it lead to people intending to continue using the app or something else? So if you can, we could dig deeper into these operating practices and the eventual outcome in the form of users' intention to download the app, intention to continue using the app. Any kind of empirical evidence will just will substantiate these findings and make it, I think, more robust in the future. With that, I stop and would like to take your questions and comments. Thank you so much. Very, very much.